Morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition here to give you a quick recap on last night's board retreat on strategic priorities. Heather, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm still thawing out a little bit. We are in the thick of track season right now for our children. And so last night, instead of being at the board meeting, I was happily watching children run races, but it was chilly. The board room was probably warmer.
Yeah, it was nice. We actually weren't in the boardroom for the board retreat last night. We were on the fifth floor, which was nice because we got to see a little bit more sunlight. You got to see down into the North High football field and on Broadway. So it was a little different vantage point for everybody, which was great. So I will try my best to do the rundown as expertly as you do for last night's meeting. So last night's meeting was, like I said, a retreat and took place in the fifth floor as opposed to the board assembly room. Just to, I think, change up the energy, have it feel a little bit more conversational. I'll say for the members of the community that were there were very few of us there. It was a little bit harder to hear, and so because they were talking in a circle with each other, and then everyone else was off to the side, so it was a little bit harder to hear the conversation. But it seemed like it was a really good conversation, and so Director Elamine kicked us off with some comments around grounding us as to why we're talking about strategic priorities for the district and for the board specifically. And because we're coming up against some really big decisions with the superintendent search, with school transformation, with the current budget approval. And so, I think there's a lot of, they wanted to really figure out, what are the things that we as a board are prioritized on and what are we prioritizing? And they went back to the strategic plan, and they've had a couple of different retreats previously. And so they went back to the strategic plan and they said, what are the strategies that we want to really prioritize focusing on? And so in previous retreats, it sounds like they whittled that list down to 10. I think previously there might have been like 20, 25 different strategies. So they whittled that list down to 10. And so yesterday's meeting's focus was to whittle us down to 5 and get us to what are our 5 strategies that we are going to be focused on. That doesn't mean that all of the other strategies are going away. What it means is, like, these are the things that we're going to prioritize in our decision making, in the reporting, in the public accountability around. So that's what we learned last night. And so Dr. Webb was back to facilitate, the board's coach was back to facilitate this conversation. And so we had interim superintendent Cox share kind of the district leadership's recommendation for what those 5 priorities should be. And so the board had an opportunity to react and discuss those 5. And they actually made a change from the 5 that interim superintendent Cox recommended to the ones that they wanted. And the one change was to actually make sure we include literacy and mathematics as a prioritized strategy that they're focusing on. And so it was I personally think that was a good kind of change. But yeah, and then after they went through that discussion, they talked a little bit about how did they want to get reports from the district about these prioritized strategies. They went through an example around school and district climate to talk about what that could look like. And the board gave some feedback about the template and some of the content within that example. And then we wrapped up. And so next steps are the board is going to officially vote to approve their 5 recommended strategies with some additional changes, with some of the changes. And they're also going to be looking to approve some operating norms going forward, which they didn't talk a whole lot about last night, because it sounds like somebody lost the notes, and I won't say who, but it sounds like somebody lost the notes the last meeting, and so they needed to kind of go back and do it over again. So
somebody's homework got eaten and it was a board member, is what you're saying.
Yes, it sounds like it might have been 1 or 2 board members that both lost, and Dr. Webb was not was holding everybody accountable for the responsibilities in a loving and jovial manner. So yeah, and so we left. We were able to get out of there before 7, and the sun was still out, and people were happy and relieved that the conversation was so streamlined. So it was
Great. Good. Did you have a slide of the night that you wanted to kind of highlight?
So yeah, my slide of the night is actually the recommended prioritized strategies that the superintendent shared with the board. So these are the 5 things that the superintendent initially recommended to the board as like, here are the priorities. And so they're all attached again to a goal from the strategic plan. 2 of them are in academic achievement, and then 1 each for student well-being, effective staff, and school and district climate. Um, the one that actually changed that the board said we wanted to take on and maybe deprioritize another one was in academic achievement. Like I said before, they added a focus on literacy and mathematics, and as like core instruction around those. And they removed provide magnet school pathways that offer innovative thematic instruction and integrated learning opportunities. And again, this was like a really, it was a substantive conversation. They went around and everyone kind of shared their opinion about the change. And, of the 8 board members that were there, 2 of them disagreed with removing this. But I think what was really important was that the board talked about like, these are still all a part of our strategic plans, even the ones that aren't on this
Sure.
table at all. But we need to prioritize core instruction for literacy and math, right? And it felt like we didn't need to have a primary focus and prioritize completing school pathways. It's just something we have to do. It didn't feel like it's something that we need to prioritize and focus on for, potentially like the next 5 years or however long.
Got it. Okay.
So
Okay.
it's still
So
something that's going to happen. All the other strategies in the strategic plan are still going to happen, but the board is focusing on these 5 as they move forward, and as they are weighing their decision making. And the superintendent even talked about how this will be related into people's evaluation. These priorities are going to be related to people's evaluations and things like that. So that was my slide of the night.
what about your most valuable moment?
So my most valuable moment last night was the change. I'll say first is Director Emmerich was the first one to really highlight that we need to have a focus on core instruction for literacy and math, especially given the fact that we just completed, or the district just completed, a literacy audit that showed that our literacy curriculum wasn't up to MPS standards in terms of what they wanted to offer. And so given that, I thought that, that was really my most valuable moment, is both Director Emmerich bringing it up and then the full board having a really good conversation about it, and ultimately saying like, we do want to elevate the core instruction in literacy and math for our students, because we know, where we're at and what we need to improve on in order to provide an high quality education for our students. So, I've spoken a lot about that at this point, but, I'd say that's my most valuable moment. I don't know, Heather, what do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting because I know that this board has had many conversations about like, if we focus on everything, will we focus on anything, right? And they also really have sort of said like, and this was the previous board strategic plan, and does it feel like our own? And so what I like is for me, it feels like this board is going slow to go fast. It feels like they're really taking the time to sort of really think about their priorities and to get really clear. And I know for one of your preferences is always to focus on less things and really get that down and then add on to it later, right? And so I think that when we know that this board is going to have to make harder decisions in the future, going slow to go fast, really focusing in on like, what do we actually value? What's the most important thing? I think this is like really, really important work that I think will help them sort of ground themselves later, right? And so math and literacy are problems. We know it, we see the results of it. And so I think this is a great move for our district. I'm really glad the board and the staff are like having the courage to like really have these conversations. What did you have a do better moment in the night though?
Yeah, so my do better moment, and I'm always trying to be positive, even if it doesn't seem like that. I do try to be positive. I do try to look for things. But I also tend to have a critical mindset. And so I do notice things that, maybe go unsaid or are missing. And so as a part of the conversation last night, the board had an opportunity to kind of reflect on all of the different priorities. And even the ones that like ended up staying based on the superintendent's recommendation. And one thing that they focused on was under goal 3 for effective staff. The prioritized strategy was focused on deepening strategic recruitment of high quality and diverse teachers and staff. And that was great that folks had energy for it. We're excited about it. We definitely need to continue to talk about like how our staff and how the adults in our building are serving our students, and how they're also reflecting their identities in our classrooms. But the focus of that conversation really kind of hinged around two things. One was it talked about recruitment and not retention. And then they talked about like teachers of color and our diverse teachers and staff. And just the thing that I want to always continue to bring up and make sure stays a part of the conversation because it's so important is not just the fact of we need teacher diversity, but we also need high quality teachers and staff, right? And I think that can get glossed over. We take it for granted, and I think we need to be sure. We need to figure out how we're making sure that we have equitable access to high quality educators. We need to figure out how we're having supporting our educators and making sure they have the training and support that they need in order to be effective, right? And so I want to make sure that we don't gloss over high quality because it's so apparent that we have a teacher diversity and a staff diversity issue. But we also need to make sure we're looking at quality as well. And so those are, I just want to say, I think the board as they continue to have a conversation, especially about this priority, that they don't only focus on the teacher diversity aspect of it, but also focus on the whole thing, right? And focus on the high quality, diverse teachers and staff. So that was my.
It seems like if math and literacy are going to be a focus, then we need to make sure teachers have the skills and the training that they need, to create something new for our students, right? So I think that's really valid. I think to pretend that each one of these issues could be sort of teased out and be its own thing without them all looping together is these are complex issues. So I mean, I think that's great. Well, thank you, Kenneth, for being in the room last night so that I could take a night away. I won't say off because it did not feel like an off night, but it was really fun to be able to be present and to be with my children. So I really appreciate that.
No problem. And yeah, I'm sorry that you're out in the cold last night. Appreciate it. Thanks.
It wasn't the coldest track meet of this year so far.
That's good. Well, thank you all for listening. Share this, like it, engage with it, tell us what you think, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.